Today we ask the question, has Sinn Fein completely lost the plot? And why have they? Sinn Fein used to be a nationalist party. They used to be something, used to stand for something. You mightn't agree with it, you mightn't agree with all their angles on it, but you at least knew what they were. Nowadays they've morphed, they've transformed into some kind of left-wing, uber-left-wing, socialisty, feministy, hodgepodge of communistic ideas and rabidly empathetic social justice warrior shtick. They were supposedly the main opposition party in Parliament for the last Parliament and then for this Parliament because they didn't win. But they've been absolutely, utterly useless. Absolutely atrocious. As the saying goes, as useful as a chocolate teapot. The Shinners, as they're affectionately called by some, have basically just shouted for more of whatever the government was doing. The COVID lockdowns, the most draconian in Europe, well, Sinn Fein wanted even harsher and harder lockdowns. Ireland's great experiment with open borders and mass immigration, well, Sinn Fein say the borders aren't open enough, we need even more people to come in. The disastrous referendum to try and remove mothers from the Irish constitution, well, Sinn Fein were totally and utterly on board with the government on that one. Their only concern was that it hadn't come quick enough. Well, the Irish people soundly and thoroughly rejected that referendum and Sinn Féin's shameful part in it. They're pretty much no opposition at all. After having taken an extended period of 5 weeks off for the new year, they seemed to spend last week in Parliament obsessing and arguing over whether Micheál Martin, the Taoiseach, called Mary Lou McDonald, the leader of Sinn Féin, a liar, as Gaeilge in Irish. Yes, that theatre, that pantomime seemed to take up an inordinate amount of parliamentary time. Utter farce. Farcical. Who gives a shit? With Ireland and Ireland's society disintegrating around us and crime going rapidly out of control, that was the shenanigans in our Parliament. Oh, God help us. They're obsessed at the moment, utterly obsessed with the Middle East. And I'm talking about the Palestinian situation, the Gaza situation at the moment. An absolute malaise, a quagmire. And my heart goes out to everybody who's caught up in that situation. It's a terrible situation, but also the situation in Yemen is also atrocious. It's also a humanitarian disaster. There's also things going on in the Congo. There's things going on in Sudan. The world is not a pleasant place, not a nice place, and there are always hot spots of humanitarian strife and revolution and war and all of the above. And I'm not forgetting, of course, the Ukrainian situation, which is front and centre of a lot of people's thinking at the moment. That is actually in Europe, unlike Gaza. So while Mary Lou and Michelle O'Neill are waving their Palestinian flags and tweeting up a storm and raising as much of a fuss as they can about the atrocities, the terrible situation in the Middle East, they don't seem to be all that invested in Darfur or in the Congo or in Yemen or in South Africa, where prominent politicians are calling for the genocide of white people. No, that all doesn't seem to bother them, which only highlights to me that this is all virtue signalling bullshit. We are a tiny nation on the edge of Europe, a tiny little nation of 5 million people on the edge of Europe. We are not some kind of diplomatic powerhouse of solving the world's problems. We never were. And we're not now. So Sinn Féin over the past few years, as far as I'm concerned, has turned into some kind of uber-feminist, ultra-lefty, virtue-signalling nonsense party. They're not serious people. It's the feminist party. It's the women's party. Think about Sweden. Think about the feminists that took over Sweden and how that all went for Sweden. Well, that's basically my view of Sinn Féin. It's full of dyed-in-the-wool, radical, hardline lefty feminists and men who are afraid of die-hard lefty feminists. That's just it. It's my take on it. And as if to highlight my point of this moralistic, virtue-signalling, grandstanding shenanigans that they seem to partake in, it's their whole thing these days, it seems to me. Yesterday, Twitter and the Twitterati and the media was full of these great brave women, Mary Lou McDonald and Michelle O'Neill, making a protestation, making a proclamation that they were not going to go to Washington, D.C., to the White House on St. Patrick's Day. They were just point-blank refusing, on a point of absolute virtuous principle against the United States and in particular the President Donald J. Trump's views and positions on Gaza and the Palestinian question.
I have taken the decision as First Minister not to attend events at the White House this year.
I've made the decision not to attend the event in the White House this year as a principled stance.
The only problem is they weren't invited. Nobody invited them to go. I say this to any sane people who are still left in the ranks of Sinn Fein. Honestly, guys, you really need to get rid of these two virtue-signalling feminist fruitcakes. They're doing you no good. This is a road that leads nowhere. And while I have you all here, I'd just like to announce my own super-duper virtue-signalling announcement. I am hereby announcing I will not be travelling to the next papal conclave. That's it. I'm not going. I refuse. On a point of principle, I shall not be there when you see all the cardinals filing in and out. I will not be among them. I'm not going, and that is final. As soon as a real nationalist party manages to get some traction in this country, Sinn Fein will be wiped away. I'm sorry, guys, you're going to be wiped out. Because you're untethered from the shore. You're sailing off into open waters and a storm is going to sink you. And as soon as the mainstream media can't protect the main parties, that includes the Sinn Feiners and Fianna Fáil and Fine Gael, the two other big parties, you can't protect you forever, guys. They can't protect you forever. Eventually the groundswell is going to be too much and the dam is going to break. Real nationalists, real proper dyed-in-the-wool Irish nationalists are going to have their day. And the first victims of that day are going to be the Shinners. Sinn Fein is going to get obliterated because you're not serious people. You're just not serious people. You seem to prioritise everywhere else and everybody else except the people you're supposed to represent, the Irish people.